I'm so delighted to be here. I don't know how many years I've been doing this, but it's not enough. I'd like to do it next year too, just in case you're wondering, Nicole. Um, this is such a good forum to spread information. And today I'm just going to take you through three case studies about how you can go from assessment to instruction and allow instruction to guide your assessment, and then what happens after you do that. So let's get started. Um, no, I don't need that here. But if you downloaded the slide handout, what you will have is that you will have most of the slides from this presentation, but you won't have any slides that when I present have a red title. You don't need this slide, so we didn't have you waste the paper on it. We didn't save it. Sometimes there are answer slides, and we didn't include those. So let's just start out with what are the objectives for this presentation. And what they are is that I'm hoping to get people to think about assessments that lead to pinpointed instruction for struggling readers. And then to think about what are the most important weaknesses that I look at. I mean, we can have students who are weak at silent E, but they aren't weak at other things we think because they only missed one of those on the assessment. But generally that tells us a pattern of what they might have struggle with. And then we're going to look at a few assessments that you might use if you aren't completely satisfied with the assessment that you're using right now for diagnostics. I have to talk, of course, about the simple view of reading. I know everyone is saturated with the simple view of reading, so I will be very quick with this. This is not a course on the simple view of reading, but just in case you don't know about the simple view of reading, or you know about it, but you're not real comfortable, let's just review it. It's a formula. It, I think, is the most important research that we have to guide instruction. Once you understand the simple view of reading, everything else falls into place. And it's essentially the essence of and the basis for science of reading research. The simple view of reading is, if you give me a score of a student, a word recognition score, now this used to be called decoding, but they've updated it to word recognition. And that is students reading in their study nonsense words out loud. You give me that score in a percentage, and you read a passage to someone, ask them questions, or have them do a retell, assign a percentage question to that, percentage to that. I can then predict your reading comprehension. I can multiply these two and predict whether you'll be strong or moderate or really poor. That is the essence of the simple view formula. So it's word recognition. I don't know where that happened. What the simple view tells us is that there are two components, two big picture components to being able to get to reading comprehension. And that is, this reader has to recognize the words and be able to translate those words into that print into words in their mind. And once they do that, they have to be able to understand. That's one thing. Can I translate that into a word in my mind? For example, if I have the word VOOP, VOOP, I look at that and I can make, I don't know what the meaning is, but I can make a word, a sound representation in my mind. In order to get to understanding what I'm reading, I have to understand what those words mean. But I can have language comprehension without reading if someone reads to me. I can decode and not understand what I'm decoding. That's me in Spanish. I took enough Spanish to be able to read Spanish, but often I don't understand what I'm reading. But people would say, "Oh, you sound like you are." So what's important to know is that neither of these is enough to be a reader. If you're good at word recognition, that's not enough. You've got to understand the language. And if you understand the language, but you're not good at word recognition, you're also not going to get to reading comprehension. These are taught and measured in two different ways. So that when this is the change in terms, I'm not going to go over this, but you have this slide just that tells you that we now use word recognition because that connotates that they look at the word and know it. They don't have to sound it out. Sounding out is not word recognition. Skip that one also. So that if you have a reading, if you have a student who is a struggling reader, and someone comes to me and they ask me, Linda, my third grader, they didn't do very well on the state test. What do I do? Well, I don't know, because I have to answer questions. The first thing I have to say is there a reading problem? No. I just continue my good instruction. But clearly, my neighbor comes to me and says that, and yes, there's a reading problem. But I have to first define, is that reading problem decoding? Or is that reading problem language comprehension? Because that's going to guide my instruction. Or is it both? Which means I've got to have different instruction for decoding than I do for language comprehension. Once I know that it's decoding, I have to figure out, is it their phonics skills that are missing? And then I go and I do diagnosis and instruction. Or is it pre-reading skills that might be phonological or they might be orthographic, so that will now guide my instruction. Over on the language side, if in language, what this presentation is not about. This presentation is how did we improve word recognition and even fluency. But if it's language comprehension, I have to decide, is their problem they just don't have a very big vocabulary or world knowledge, which is relatively easy to fix because I can preview the information they need. But if it's syntax or reading, whoa, sometimes that's beyond the classroom teacher or beyond being able to get down to the depths of syntax or reasoning skills, and we do need to do something extra. Or is it both of those? So now we're over the simple view of reading, and we're talking about the word recognition side. So let's look at phonics or pre-reading instruction. And it's very important to know what we mean when we're talking about structured literacy. And so we're talking about that it's explicit, it's systematic and sequential, and it's cumulative. So let's look at explicit. You guys, that means the teacher says exactly what to do. That's what the teacher does. Nothing is left to the imagination. I think you know that. An example is I took a course that told me to teach the children short A by saying, hey, everybody, this is cat, this is man, and this is bash. What's the sound that's the same in all of them? That is not explicit instruction, because that's asking the student to figure out what sound I'm trying to get. I just want to make it real clear. Explicit instruction tells the student what they need to know. And so the other thing about explicit instruction, if you think about it, nothing is left to chance. There's no chance that the student will misunderstand when we're introducing a concept. Systematic and sequential means that you have a well-defined scope and sequence that intentionally builds from the simple to the complex. One of the things we're going to talk about is, how do you know where to enter when you're giving intervention instruction? How do you think about that beyond just they need this program or that program? The other thing is that students are first taught simply, and sequential means that you know what order, and I think cumulative is a bit of a subset of systematic and sequential, because it means you're always including the skills that were already introduced in what you do. And I'm going to give you an example of that. Lots of states use DIBELS that I work with. or Ames Web or some other assessment. And teachers tell me that when they teach silent E, their first graders start reading the CVC words with all long vowels. Well, the reason for that is that what we've done is we've taught long E, or silent E, but we haven't gone and compared it and had the children recognize the two. So we haven't been cumulative or sequential in that, is that we're going to include it and we're going to compare it with what we've taught before, compare the patterns. And that's that. I know that if you give dibbles and if you teach first or second grade, you've had that experience. Most teachers have. So more about structured literacy. They're scripted lessons. They may tell you exactly what to say, and they may give you a general overview. They also tell you what to teach. And the most important thing is they have word lists, sentences, and texts so that you don't have to make up words. I cannot tell you how many times I go into a new teacher who's trying to put together a CVC lesson and she uses the word car or she uses the word way because it looks like a CVC, but it's not. So a good program has the word lists already in there. If you don't have that, you can put your word list together beforehand, but it's very hard to make up words on the spot. You probably know that already. So this is what a good lesson has. The instruction is quick. It's modeling. It's quick. We do. And there's lots of guided practice with immediate feedback. Very little choral reading. Very little choral reading, because choral reading teaches my struggling readers to master the nanosecond lag. And so we always want to make sure that what the student, when they're demonstrating whether they can read or not, that we have not chorally read it before and that they're reading this without prep. That's what we want the kids to be able to do, is read it the first time they say it without any prep when we're giving them immediate feedback. There's independent number practice number 1 when I give them feedback, and then independent practice 2, where now I'm pretty sure they've got I've listened and I know they can do this without making mistakes. And then independent practice, they might read to one another that or they might go and read with the computer. But basically, you don't go to independent practice until you've had the students read aloud and give them guided practice. And then finally, there's assessment of mastery before you move on. So again, I cannot overemphasize the emphasis on individual practice rather than choral practice. So here's a skills map. This is essentially a guide. All these are in your handouts. This is a guide for you. It just shows that there are pre-reading skills. And so we want to make sure that our struggling readers have mastered all of these, which would be phonological skills and letter name skills, and letter sounds, and then a few heart words before you even begin to teach phonics to the struggling readers. This summer, I've been tutoring some children. I don't usually get to work with children 30 days. I was in a 30-day pilot tutoring children. And we started out we had one group that started out just teaching phonological awareness for 7 lessons, introduced them to how do you identify vowel sounds, etc. Then we had another group that did the same thing, but they dove right into the phonics lessons. And it turns out that the prepping of this phonological awareness right here, getting the kids my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders to understand the vowel sounds in words, we got better results when we did that. We had fewer phonics lessons, but the kids had the underpinnings in order to do this. That's what we expected. And it turned out that way. And the other teacher was fabulous. So really, she should have done better. But because of the need for these children to shore up their phonological awareness, which is a pre-reading skill, um, it didn't work out quite as well. Okay, so we'll go here. And I'm going to, again, skip this just for the time. If you have other questions about this, you can ask me at the end. I'm not going to skip this part. That is that the most important thing you do as a kindergarten or first grade teacher is make sure that students can read the CBC words that follow the patterns and the VC words. The reason for that is where those are regularly spelled words. That sets the tone. It puts the brain into order so that it can get ready to deal with more irregularly spelled words. So when children can't read CBC words accurately and easily, don't move on in your intervention until they can, because they'll never master everything else if they aren't good at CBC. That's just thought. We have mastery and automation. This is Michael Hunter, my business partner, and I use these terms. They're often used interchangeably. We don't. What we say is that mastery is the ability to accurately do something, but it might be slow and effortful. You can accurately do it, but you're not quick at it, and maybe you're not 100% accurate. Maybe you out of every 10 words you read, you miss one. Well, we've got to be accurate, and we've got to have some ability to do this quickly before we move on. The reason I'm telling you this is, for example, if I teach short A and a student is able to read short A words with being able to read it without doing sound by sound, but they still have to think about it, I will move to short E. Or I wouldn't teach short E next, to short I or short O or whatever I'm teaching next. But I wouldn't move on from short O until they were automatic with short A, so that I can move on to I can move on if they have mastery. Yeah, it's still effortful, but I'm not going to get too far into my scope and sequence until they're automatic, which means they can do it accurately and without any conscious effort. And until I'm not going to move beyond the big picture to the next step. Are there any questions, Nicole, that people have about this? Mastery and automaticity?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now.
So. Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure, because those are two concepts. One is I can do it. One is I can do it and it's automatic. All right. So this is the meat of this presentation. What we've got is we're going to talk about general stages of word reading difficulty, and how do we get assessment, and how do we think about placing and teaching students. So there are 3 stages of reading difficulty. There's pre-reading, there's beginning reading, and there's advanced reading.
Linda, I do have someone that I
Okay.
do have 2 people actually that just raised their hand. So I can ask them to unmute. So
okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
My chat is disabled, guys. I'm sorry. I couldn't put any questions in there earlier because it was disabled and I wasn't allowed to unmute. So
okay.
I forgot the question that I had, but I also wanted to let you know that.
Okay. You couldn't put anything in the chat. I thought we could still chat with us as hosts. No?
Okay. Anybody else have a question? No. Okay. Oh, no. Okay. Well, I'll keep going. The 3 stages of reading difficulty that as a big picture we start thinking about are, is the student in pre-reading phase? Are they even ready to learn to read? And I have 5th graders who are still in the pre-reading stage. Are they beginning readers or are they advanced readers? And we'll just look at what is the pre-reading stage. The pre-reading stage would include they don't have their phonological or phonemic awareness, and they've got to be able. Here's the question. Can they blend and segment without letters any sound? And can they recognize the difference between two words that have, it's called a minimal contrast, that they have only one sound? Like, what's the sound is different between cat and caught, or between caught and cod? So lack of phonological or phonemic awareness. And that would be, you could have that at the syllable level. Can they recognize the syllables? Napkin. At the onset rhyme level, can they blend and segment app, nap? And at the phoneme level, so we have to figure out, where are they? Can they blend and segment app, nap, and then tell me which part is different. Rereading on the orthographic or the letter side is, do they know all their letter names and sounds? And I know that a lot of you only teach sounds, and that's okay at the beginning, but eventually they've got to know their letter names, because when I introduce the digraph SH, I can't say spells sh. I have to translate to the letter name. So they do need to know all of those. And if they don't know any high frequency words that aren't spelled regularly, then that becomes an issue also. So those are any of those skills missing? They're in the pre-reading phase. And remember, yes.
We do have a question.
Okay.
She couldn't type fast enough, she said. When is it okay to move on to mastery versus automaticity?
Okay. Mastery means you don't move on until the student can do it well, can displays that they understand the concept, they are accurate, and that but they may still have to think about it. So, for example, I would never move on from short vowels into whatever the next thing I teach, which might be open syllables or closed syllables, or not closed, those are closed syllables, or are controlled or silent E, whatever. If students are still struggling, they're very slow, they read word by word. We're actually going to talk about that in a minute, but I want to just essentially, you think, they read a decodable reader like this. Matt sat on the rug. Okay, that's mastery. They've done it well. They've done it. Okay, but they're not quick at it. So I can move on if they can do that. I can move on to the next short vowel. I am not going to move on. Let's say if Sam sat on the mat, that would be short A. Then I next teach short I. I'm not going to move on from short I until the student is reading short A words with much more automaticity, meaning faster, that they don't have to think about it, not word by word. We'll talk about that in a minute. Especially, I might move on to short I might move on to short O, but I can tell you that I will definitely not move if, when I finish and I give them decodable sentences and words to read, and they're at the short vowel level and they're still reading sound by sound, I'm going to work on getting them to read quickly and accurately as opposed to quickly, because they've got to develop that. They've got to develop automaticity, which is accurate and quick, as opposed to just mostly accurate. I hope that answers the question. Anybody, if I got a heads up or anything on that?
Yeah, I would say keep going, because we're gonna just there's questions coming in, and we'll get to the end.
Okay, and I think I will talk about that later as we go through.
Okay.
So we've
Thank you.
talked about beginning reading. We've talked about pre-reading. And for example, automaticity would be being able to name the letter sounds in a certain amount of time. It doesn't have to be extremely fast, but in a certain amount of time. I wouldn't move on until I could do that. I wouldn't move on if I had to say to this, if I gave the student, what's the word? And they went, now that's too much time. That they're not ready to start putting letters and sounds together. I'll try not to belabor that too much. So let's beginning reading. All beginning reading is essentially difficulty with one syllable, and I sometimes use two syllables also, but one syllable short vowel words. It's real simple. That's what it is. Can they read words like at, mess, pig, rob, lug, or path, check, drink, judge, thrush? It's just one syllable words with short vowels. That is beginning reading, and they need to master that. And again, I worked with third, fourth, and fifth graders, 9 of them who couldn't do this when we started. This is also if students are reading sound by sound, they have phoneme manipulation problems. We're going to look at that later. Right now, you're all going to go, what is it? What are you talking about? I'll get there. So you don't even have to ask a question about that. So that's what beginning reading is. Their fluency might be word by word, and that you just don't move beyond. If they can't develop fluency, some kind of reasonable rate of reading with just short vowel words, they will not be able to do or develop with the more complex vowel sounds. So this would be the kind of text that they would read. You can see mud is in the tub, Gus can rub in the mud. Word by word reading is exactly like I said before. Mud is in the tub. That's it. You go back, you have them read it a second time, a third time, a fourth time. And this is where repeated readings will help them become more. First, you have to get the accuracy. Then you work on the rate. All right. So
There's a
yes.
couple of timely questions here.
Okay,
in regard
good.
to moving from first stage to second stage. So I just wanted to address those. As far as first stage word reading, does it also apply to poor encoders as far as spelling? And then what about high fluency or automaticity, but very poor spelling?
Okay, let's talk about spelling at this level. Are we talking about at the beginning reading level?
So going from first stage word reading, does that also apply then?
In my opinion, and this is debated more and more and more, in my opinion, at this stage, I do not move forward until they have mastered the spelling patterns, which are very few at this stage. When we first teach, I don't even have them practice a spelling list because they should be able to spell cat, sad, pig, path, any of those. There are no spelling choices except for C and K. And then when you get to, do they use CH or, I mean, sorry, use DGE or SH, or when do they use CK? It's at the end. Then I will give them some spelling lists to practice so that they can help remember what the rule is. I don't teach the rule, I teach the pattern. So the answer is, in my opinion, spelling matches reading at this stage, right here.
So
Do they have to be fast? I can't answer that because I get a lot of kids with dysgraphia. And so when I'm teaching spelling, if I have a student with dysgraphia, I have them use letter tiles because I just don't have time to wait for them to write all the words. I know, I understand that writing is so important, but when I have 5 kids and one of them takes 5 times as long to write, or 2 of them do, to spell the word than the others, I just have to have those 2 spelled with letter tiles. I hope that answers your question. All right. So we've got beginning reading. It's about short vowels. If I were with you all, I would have you all shout out, what's beginning reading about short vowels? And now we have advanced reading. That is difficulty with advanced vowel spellings. What are advanced vowel spellings? Any spelling that isn't a short vowel spelling with one letter spelling a vowel sound. And so we would have words like with vowel teams, and then we would have other words with other patterns that you can see. And you can see that we also do multi-syllable here. So what's advanced reading? What we want is if the student is at low, they can read these words, but they're at low accuracy. They read fine they read the words accurately in text, but then you put them in context and they're doing guessing and they're leaving off endings or they're reading extremely slowly. Then this is also an advanced reading stage. Okay, it may be that they don't need the decoding so much as they need the practice in text, or they may need both. This is, in my opinion, where spelling, I do not let poor spelling hold back my instruction in reading. That I'm often working on spelling words that were having spelling tests on words that also include words that were in the past, and we do study the words. So I would not be reading decodable text at this stage. I would be reading more of a grade level text. And I'm not talking about a leveled text. I'm talking more about something you get from 6 Minute Solution or a fluency program, not one that's about interest levels. So we've got the 3 stages of reading: pre-reading, beginning reading, advanced reading. The difference in the summer between pre-reading and beginning reading and advanced reading is that I started off teaching only pre-reading skills, and the other teacher, she started right with beginning reading and included the pre-reading along with the beginning reading. Okay, it was successful. It just wasn't as successful. All right. So we've given you a checklist for thinking about this, and I'll be using this checklist as I go through and do case study number 1. Brandon, it's a pseudonym. He moved to a new school in early October, 1st grade, and his ELA instruction when he moved, I think it was in October, they didn't give him an assessment or anything, they just put him into Wilson Foundations for whole group, and they used the same thing for small group. So he was getting phonics instruction. When we got to January, these were his scores. For his DIBEL scores. For phonologic phoneme segmentation fluency, he was a low risk. For nonsense word fluency, he was at some risk. The reason is that this time they didn't separate out whole words read versus did you just get the sounds right? And what he read is he read all the letter sounds correct, but he only read the word correctly 1 out of 14. So he had authenticity at letter sounds. So he had mastered that, but he was in the very beginning reading stage because he couldn't recode. Then we went to oral reading fluency and his score was 1. So he clearly has some issues. And so you can see that's Brandon. So what did we do? We assessed Brandon. What we had done was we'd given them grade level fluency. That was the ORF, oral reading fluency. That was mid-January. He had low accuracy and he had a low rate. So we then need to go and look further. The team, I would have gone straight on, but the team at the school said, no, let's hand it home. Maybe that oral reading was just a mistake. So what we did is we assessed his CVC decoding level, and what we found is we gave an assessment, and I'm just going to show you that he read 2 of these high frequency words correctly. He couldn't read one, they, or R. He read C and U. We gave him we gave him CVC words. He read rag, sound by sound. He read lid as lit, dot as dude, which usually they read it as don't. That was kind of cute, I thought. Hum, he read correctly for some reason, and bet he read as beat. We analyzed the errors and we found that he has short vowel problems very clearly. And then we had him read with words with digraphs, and he didn't get any of those correct. We had him read words with blends, and he got, one of those words correct. And then we had him read some sentences with short vowels, and notice he did better when he read in sentences. And the reason he did better is he had some context. If he can figure out the first words, then he can use some context, but he did miss quite a few words. And then we had him read nonsense words, and out of 8, he only got 2 right. And 1 he read, you can see sound by sound is what that means. So clearly his scores that you can see are down here. And he made 13 short vowel errors. He missed a lot. He had a lot of errors. So we went and we did a pre-reading skill. So he had sound by sound, he had low accuracy. We didn't have word by word reading because he didn't read word by word, he couldn't read well enough. So now we're going to give him the phonological awareness. We're going to find out about his phonological awareness. And here's what we learned about his phonological awareness.
Linda,
Yes?
we're just having some sound issues. As you get closer to your screen, there's some muffling of sound. So if you could just maybe it's your earpieces or something.
Thank you. It might be. I took one out because it kept falling out. Yeah, maybe this will be better.
I can hear you better.
Okay, that was what happened.
Thank you.
Thank you for telling me that. I'm sorry. Okay. He had BDPQ confusions. He did almost know all his letter names, and he knew quite a few of his letter sounds, but not enough to be able to read. So we are going to shore that up. Then we looked at his phonological awareness, and his phonological awareness was he could blend compound words, he could blend 2-syllable words, he could blend onset rhyme, but when we got to 3 sounds, he could blend those, but he couldn't blend 4 sounds. He could segment 3 sounds, but he couldn't segment 4 sounds. And he could not recognize the difference between which sound is different when we gave him 2 words. We call that phoneme chaining. We'll get into that. So Brandon was clearly at the pre-reading level. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He wasn't ready to learn to read. And so all the instruction that he'd had in beginning reading was sounding to him like this, blah, 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 blah. And when he practiced, he couldn't do it. So either had to practice doing it wrong. So we had him all in the wrong, we had him in the wrong level. So this is what we learned there. That we assessed his reading. He had problems with phonemes. He had problems with letter names, with letter sounds. And although it didn't show up on this, we did give a separate assessment. At this time, we were not assessing high frequency words, and he didn't know very many of those. So we can go back and see that he has letter sounds, phonological issues, phoneme manipulation issues, and high frequency. So we looked at this. Well, all he was missing in his lowercase letter names was he called J as I and S as E. I don't understand this problem, but he had it. He had BD issues. And the sounds that he missed were, I don't have this whole thing. Yeah. Okay, the sounds he missed were X, he said was, and he knew all his vowel sounds except that E, he said instead of short E, he gave long E. Didn't know any digraphs. We didn't really care about that. So we've got instruction. We've got diagnosis that now tells us exactly where we start our instruction. That's what we're going to start working on. So we can literally say, what are his orthographic issues? What are his phonemic issues? So let's go and look and see here. Well, He can only hold 3 sounds when he blends, which is fine for a kindergartner when they learn, but a first grader is going to have to real quickly get to blending 4 sounds with letters. So we're going to need him to be able to do that without letters. And the same thing is that he couldn't segment 4 sounds. So we're going to work on that also. So he can't blend or segment 4 sounds. Phoneme chaining. This is where we had him identify what's different between rod and rock. And he said the middle sound. He pointed, change the middle sound. What's difference between rock and knock? Well, he changed the first because he might have known how to spell it, probably not. But anyhow, this was random guessing. So we know that we have to teach phoneme manipulation. Phoneme manipulation is word chaining, sound chaining without letters. And again, for time, I'm going to wait. I have a video at the end to show you. So I'm just going to go through this. And I talked about minimal pairs. You've got all of this in your handout if you want. And we assessed Brandon for 10 high frequency words. He knew the, you, a, is, and I. And so for our scope and sequence, he needed to learn these 4 also as these 5 as pre-reading. And I am giving no, that's another thing. I'm not giving a session on high. You can look up how to teach high frequency words on Patton's website. I think Michael Hunter has done some good sessions on that. So just to let you know. So now we finished our assessment. We learned the basic heart words, and now we know exactly what to focus intervention on. So watch this. What happened with Brandon? Well, during the first grade, he mastered his pre-reading skills during in-class intervention. This was when the teacher worked with small groups, she worked with Brandon. This was a Title I school, but they didn't serve first grade students. They only served second, third, and higher, second and higher. He was exposed during whole class instruction to foundations while he was shoring up his pre-reading skills. In second grade, he mastered beginning phonics and some advanced phonics, and he did that with whole group instruction in class. But Title I gave an intensive beginning phonics program, which was not foundations, and they used power readers from Sopris West, decodable books, to get used for decodable reading. So that's what Brandon got because he was eligible for Title I. By the time third grade came, at the beginning of third grade, he was well on his way to mastering advanced phonics. And here's the good news. Brandon didn't even qualify for Title I in third grade. So what happened? You can see that his DIBEL scores from December of first grade to September went from oral reading fluency 1 to 61. Now, I know 61 isn't benchmark, 77. Oh my gosh, they were so happy. Here's the better story. His accuracy went from 44% to 95%. 95 is not enough. They still needed to work on accuracy before they even started working on trying to get him to read faster. They automatically read faster when you work on accuracy. But this was huge. And his decoding surveys, on the beginning, which is short vowel words, he went from 22 out of 50 in January in the first grade to 49 out of 50 in September. And his advanced, they didn't even give, and he was at 20 out of 30. Our benchmark is 24, and that would be at the end of third grade. And so you can see that Brandon was a reader. He went from being a total non-reader to a reader. Look what happened to his DIBEL scores. Look at the progression. Oral reading fluency 1, 17, 13, 38, 57, 61. Just kept getting better because that was pinpointed focus look at the accuracy. They didn't ever work on rate. They were still working on accuracy. You can see 13%, 74%, 62%, 88, 95, 95. So they've still got work to do on accuracy. But his rate has gone up even when they're still working on accuracy.
We have a couple questions in the chat.
Ready?
Folks are curious about what was the intensive phonics program that was used, and if this is one-on-one or small group, and how can we compare Dibbles to Ames Web? So can you talk to those various?
First grade was one-on-one in class, small, instead of going to a small group, he did one-on-one for the pre-reading. Second grade, the Title I was small group because he was ready. He matched the other children. And I if my memory is right, the groups were 2 to 4 children. And I don't remember whether he was in a 2 or 3 or 4. That mainly was scheduling. The last question was, okay. They used a program that we wrote, and I'm not here to promote a program. I mean, there are a number of programs that could have been good, but we were their advisors, and it was called Phonics Plugin. And then that was for the phonics instruction. For the pre-reading instruction, there was not a program that they used. They focused on, I'm going to get the letter sounds right. I'm going to get the letter names right. I'm going to work on phonological awareness, and I'm going to work on heart words. So there was really no program for that. And then we had an oral reading fluency that we used. And I think Patan has some I think you have some seminars posted on what we do for oral reading fluency. There are many programs that could have worked, you all. How do you compare to Ames Web? Accuracy is going to be exactly a straight one-on-one comparison. And oral reading fluency, you're doing the same thing. So you're going to be able to see whether he's getting faster. The benchmarks will just be a little bit different because you're using different passages. So I'd say there's a one-to-one correlation between, notice I'm not showing what's the percentage of benchmark. I'm just showing how did it improve. Benchmark was somewhere in the 70s, and I know that, and we're aware of that, but we're never trying to get the student to rate benchmark before they're at the accuracy benchmark of 97% consistently. Does that answer it? Okay, I'll keep going. So what made the difference with Brandon? Why was it that Brandon caught up, essentially? I mean, he wasn't all the way caught up, but he was essentially caught up. We pinpointed the weak areas and focused on those. Brandon had very good comprehension, language comprehension. None of his intervention was on language comprehension. It was all on, when you talk about the simple view of reading, on the word recognition side or the phonological awareness and letter naming side. They continuously analyze the data to know what's working and what's not working. There were lots of, okay, I think he knows all his letter names. I'm going to have him name them. And how fast can he do it? Is he doing it fast enough so that we can stop practicing letter names? You don't have to practice letter names forever once they know it. So they moved forward only when Brandon had mastery, and he continued to practice the skill until he had automaticity. So he's still practicing oral reading for automaticity. It isn't there. He's not fast enough. All right. So what else made the difference? There was targeted one-on-one instruction, and there was small group instruction, and it was just based on his needs. This answers the question right there. So let's get quickly at case study number 2, Letty. Letty's in 5th grade. We just met Letty last year, so we don't have outcomes, but we do want to I wanted to show you a 5th grader. How do we go about analyzing a 5th grader? Well, she's in 5th grade, so we're not going to start with pre-reading. We're going to start by doing an oral reading fluency screening with grade level material, and we did that in October. And we just had her read a grade level passage, and here's what she did. She attempted 57. she missed 6, and it equaled 51 words correct per minute. That's 89% accuracy. So she is slow and she is inaccurate. So already we know that. Now we have to ask, why is she slow and inaccurate? Well, this is what we want her to be, is 130 words and 97%, and she's not nearly there. So what do we do? Well, I bet that gave you a little click. So what do we do? Next, we learn she has low accuracy, low rate. So next we go and we look at, can she read beginning? Can she read CBC words? And because she's in 5th grade, can she read advanced vowel words? So we're looking at, we know she doesn't need pre-reading skills. She's reading well enough to rule out that she doesn't have pre-reading skills. But boy, we better look at her accuracy. We better look how she reads out of context. So what we did is we gave a different assessment this time, but it still assesses the same thing. And you can see that she got 10 out of 10 heart words. She got 10 out of 10 heart words. She got real words, on CBC words, she got 11 out of 13. That's not good for a 5th grader. A 5th grader should not have to say, I don't know, for tack. A 5th grader should not read cram as cream. So we know she needs some short vowel work. Here's where it really shows. We had her read nonsense words. When she came to gat, she said, I don't know. So she can't read words that she doesn't know what they mean. And boy, that becomes increasingly difficult, or that she hasn't seen before. So clearly we've got to start with short vowels with her. So she's at the beginning reading stage. Do you see how, I hope you see how we learned that. We also are going to learn, where is she in advanced reading, in advanced vowels, and you can see, that she does have advanced vowel weaknesses, but we're not going to work on those yet because she also has short vowel weaknesses. She has advanced vowel weaknesses, which means she needs some explicit instruction after she masters CBC. So we learned that. Let's look at multisyllable words. Chuckle, motion, volcanic, demonstrate. She could only read 1. Interestingly, she read 2 of the nonsense words correctly. But so we've got, once we get to the point where she's ready for multisyllable words, we've got to get those right away. We teach multisyllable words at the short vowel level first. But now we know where to start her instruction. We're going to start with short vowels. Can she read short vowels? Then we'll go to digraphs, blends, 2-syllable words, and schwa. Once she's mastered all of this, we'll move to advanced vowels. The other thing we'll do is have her reading uncontrolled text to improve her accuracy and rate. You can see that's what that was. So when accuracy is below 97% at grade level, you're going to start with reading accurately. Doesn't matter whether you're reading at fast or not. It's got to start with accuracy. How did we decide what level to start her accuracy practice? Because these are, for example, 6-minute solution passages. So if, when she assessed, remember she had 51 words, we have a little algorithm, it's included in your packet. She had 51 words a minute. So we find 51 words a minute right here. All right, you see that? We found 51 words a minute. And we also find her accuracy. It's 85 to 89 here. So she's got 85 to 89. If it were only accuracy, we'd start at 3rd grade. But you know what? We're going to start her and get her to read 1st grade passages accurately. And that's how we determine, we're not going to practice with grade level passages. That's how we determine it. We look at their accuracy and at their rate. So let's keep going. And when we look at both, and you'll choose, I'm going to start with 1st grade materials because I choose the lower of these two. Probably going over that too fast. All right. So this is the kind of reading that she would be doing. This is a level 1. Did you know that, not level, I want to say first grade. We call it set 1. We never tell them it's first grade passages. We just say you're on set 1. Did you know that all cats are related? You're going to think, well, you're only working on short vowels. Why aren't you doing decodable work with her? The reason we're not using decodable is she has demonstrated an ability to read quite a few 5th grade words correctly in text. So we're not going to confine her just to decodable. We learned that when we looked at that, but these words are easy enough that she will be able to read them in text. Lots of older students read much better in context than they do out of context. This is where we start. This is where we would end. And you can see this text. Roadrunners are members of the cuckoo family. Their home is in the desert. It's much harder. So we work up from first grade level to 5th grade level. All right. So I'm going to skip that. I want to get to Kalista. So Kalista is in 2nd grade. Some of you may have seen my Reading Rocket videos, and Kalista is the star student in the Reading Rocket videos. So let's look at Kalista. This is Kalista's beginning decoding survey. And the most important thing I want you to see is she has lots of accurates here on CVC words, but she's reading them sound by sound. She was doing it silently. She's going, but she's reading it, and all of the nonsense words were sound by sound. She did miss one. She missed a few, but she's largely getting the words right. There's a difference between sound by sound reading at fly. They're not getting the word right, and reading rag. So she's getting them right. So what we know about Kalista is that she reads sound by sound. Remember, that's beginning reading. Sound by sound reading is very beginning phonics. We did have her read a decodable passage. And do you notice that all the sound by sounds in this decodable passage was short word vowels? Sound by sound. So we know that and she's getting them right. She's just having to do sound by sound. So what do we do with Kalista? Her biggest weakness is sound by sound readers. And this is what I'm just going to tell you. Sound by sound readers have a phoneme manipulation problem. Now, some sound by sound readers, you say, oh, you don't have to sound it out, and they can do it. Sometimes they just need to be prompted, but that is not the case with Kalista or persistent sound by sound readers. So we're going to start by teaching Kalista how to manipulate sounds to automaticity. Let's watch how this works.
Kalista is in 1st grade at Windy Hill Elementary School in Calvert County, Maryland. She's an early stage reader who sounds out letters accurately, and she can blend those letters together to form words.
Kalista, could you please read this column?
Did, add, pal, gum.
Reading expert Linda Farrell is helping Kalista take the next step toward fluent reading, reading each word as a whole rather than one sound at a time. Kalista is in 1st grade at...
Touch and say tap.
Oh, okay, just a minute. Okay, so what did we do with Kalista? I hope you heard the sound by sound. Sometimes she was doing onset and then rhyme. She'd read b, at, bat, but she was not reading the whole word. Well, this is what we do. We work with phoneme manipulation.
What I'd like you to do is I want you to go back.
Oops, that's not where I want to be. That's where I want to be.
Touch and say tap.
Tap.
Can you change tap?
By the way, these letter tiles do not have letters on. These colored tiles do not have letters on them. They're colored tiles only.
To tape.
Miss Farrell gives Kalista plenty of quiet time to think about which sounds are changing.
Let's check that, because One thing you did right is there's always only one tile that changes. Let's touch and say tap.
App. Tap.
Touch and say tape.
Ape. Tape.
Which one's different?
The middle.
Yeah. What sound do you take out of tap?
A.
A is the name of the letter. What sound do you take out of tap?
Ah.
Okay, take it out. And what sound do you put in to make tape?
E.
Say tape.
Ape.
Say touch and say.
Ape. Tape.
What sound was that?
A.
It was A. Okay, so you put in the sound A. If I want to change tape, tape to take, which one do I change?
This one.
Yes. What sound do I take out of tape?
P.
What sound? Yeah. Okay, and what sound do I put in to make it take? Now, this time, when I ask you to make the change, keep your mouth closed and think about it, okay? Okay, so don't open your mouth. You can think the sounds in your head. So we've got take to make. Okay, look down. You can look down. Take to make. Can you say take to make?
Take to make.
Okay. Which one changes? Keep your mouth closed. Don't. You have to think the sounds, okay? T. Okay, so take out t. And what are you going to put in for make? What sound? Okay, can you change? Now again, mouth closed. Okay, but I'm going to ask you to say make to mate. Say that. Make to mate.
To mate.
Okay, close your mouth and think about which one. When you know, touch it. Okay, what sound comes out of make? K. Take it out. What sound goes in for mate? T. Okay. All right. I hope that you noticed the transition, how difficult it was for Kalista to stop sounding out the sounds and think them in her head. And that's the problem with sound by sound readers, is they can't think them in their head. We did a lot of these, and Kalista got to mastery, but she was slow. You could see, did you see how much slower it was when she had to think the sound rather than when she could say it out loud? What we're going to see now is the part of this 20-minute lesson that I did with her, that the only time I'd ever met her, and that now we're going to have her read. And remember, she was reading sound by sound. So let's see what happens. What I'd like you to do is I want you to go back, and this time keep your mouth closed before and think the sounds, and don't open your mouth until you know what the word is and can read it, okay?
Did.
Keep going.
Add. Pal. And. Mud.
Okay. Whew, you got pretty good there, didn't you? Closing your mouth.
You can sense the wheels turning in Kalista's mind as she works silently to sound out the letters and put the sounds together into a word. Next comes work on fluency.
Let's start right here.
Can. The. Lad.
Okay, now go back and read it again.
Can. The. Lad.
Now, can you go back and read it? Can the lad? Okay, read it.
Can the lad
Okay.
be in the mud?
Okay, read it like you'd say it.
Be in the mud.
Okay, now read the whole sentence.
Can the lad Be in the mud.
Okay, can you read that one?
Kim was hot and got a fan. Kim was hot and got a fan.
So I hope you saw how working without letters on a skill that she was missing in word chaining, in sound chaining, translated right to being able to read with letters and read faster. I hope you saw it get faster. So that's our wrap up, is that we saw students as being assessed at different levels, and then we saw how to guide instruction. And we have some resources that you have. And that is the wrap up for me. And I appreciate your questions earlier. I went a little longer because we had questions, but now I'm ready to entertain questions.